I'm coming for your children. Oh, you're one of those. Ah.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on Twitch, twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. I'm producer Dave. You can find me on Grindr.
And I am HK Perrin. You can find me on Twitter at HK Perrin, and you can find me in the chat at Sylphweed.
Fuck yeah. So do you know who Chris Ruffo is?
Unfortunately.
So do you know who Liz Crokin is?
No, I don't.
Liz Crokin was one of the primary QAnon people.
Oh, okay.
So it's this video is as if Liz Crokin became like 30% of Chris Ruffo.
I don't understand.
You will as we get into the video. This is Chris Ruffo speaking at Hillsdale College. This is from 2 days ago, and this is so fucking pilled.
All right. How's everyone? Good. Good to meet you. I think I see some of my students from this last week. I've been teaching a one-credit journalism class. All of the students present will get an A in the class, so congratulations. Over there. Well done.
This is the jokes part.
Well, let's see what we can do. Let's get in some trouble tonight, maybe. I know that this is being recorded and live streamed, so I'm hoping to say something interesting and noteworthy in the next 30 minutes or so. The topic tonight is laying siege to the institutions. And so the question is, what does that mean? But before we can answer that question...
I know what laying siege to the institutions means. I have it from Betty Washam. It's going to be something along the lines of...
Did you know that Hollywood has been eating our kids?
The context in which that question must be asked. And so I'd like us to take a step back to the period that none of you remember. You're all far too young. The period of 1968. If you look at 1968, it was really a turning point, a very kind of paradoxical and contradictory turning point in American history. You had then all of the left-wing ideologies that seem so dominant in our institutions today being born in the months in and around 1968. You had the birth of identity politics.
Yes, before 1968, there was never any identity.
Never.
Not even slavery. Not even Jim Crow.
How can you identify as a slave? That makes no sense.
Well, it turns out that identity politics also works the other way, in which someone identifies you as someone who should be a slave.
Yeah, and it's also like literally any politics is identity politics because people are things.
You had the idea that the United States could be overthrown through cultural revolution. And then you had the very beginnings of militant street activists that had sought to, what they believed, use urban guerrilla warfare to achieve their political objectives. And I think many of the stories that I work on, many of the phenomena that we see, many of the public policies that some of our friends on the far left in places like Seattle or San Francisco or New York or Chicago are proposing, if you actually look back and look at the literature, look at the manifestos, look at the publications of that era, you see a remarkable similarity. It's almost as if we're living in permanent repeat of some of those ideas. The only difference, unfortunately, is that in 1968, it was also the year that was the election of Richard Nixon, not exactly a fire-breathing leftist. And so
you would call him a social justice warrior or some shit today because he was interested in the EPA.
Bleeding heart liberal, I guess. I don't know.
Something like that. Oh, Lisa, I see Lisa up in the chat. By the way, people listening on the podcast, we do have a chat. Lisa, this is going to go in a completely different way than you think it is.
You saw this left-wing movement burn out over time. By the mid-1970s, the groups like the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, the Weather Underground, or their counterparts in Europe, in Germany and Italy and other countries, that had sought to really capitalize on what they saw as a world historical change in 1968.
So the police shot a lot of the people that were part of the Black Panther Party. That's why a lot of them went away because they dead.
Yeah.
At really a sad and divided end. They were infiltrated by law enforcement. Their campaign for urban guerrilla warfare generated discontent, especially in the communities that they claimed to represent. And so by the end of it, there was just a few dozen angry, disillusioned, demoralized radicals. The FBI had swept up many of them. And what you sense in the literature and the history of the time, and you could read it in all of the journalistic work, the letters, the essays, some of the academic work, is that they realized that this moment had been lost. They looked at it as the victory of counter-revolutionary forces, embodied most prominently in the United States by Richard Nixon. But really, at the heart of it, the lesson that they learned at the time was that the working class in the West, in Western Europe, and most especially in the United States, could not be roused to revolution. That class-based idea that you could have the suppressed workers or the oppressed workers rise up against their bosses in the factories in places like Detroit, Michigan, was doomed. And in fact, working class Americans were not only non-revolutionary, they were anti-revolutionary. They were actually satisfied with a rapidly rising standard of living, with benefits and privileges that their parents and grandparents could not have even imagined.
So when he says working class, he's leaving out an important word. He means the white working class.
Yeah.
Because there was all kind of stuff for the white working class. He's talking about basically, it's still what we call the post-war era, post-World War II, the post-World War II boom. During the time he's talking about, there was still redlining, where black people couldn't buy houses in certain neighborhoods. Some of it in the law and some of it just de facto because the real estate agent wouldn't take you there.
Well, not just that, but like you couldn't get a loan. Even if the real estate agent did take you there, the bank would turn you down.
Right. Redlining has it's a layer. It's like a layers of different shit. And I do mean shit. Like literal poop.
Perhaps when they were immigrating from
or as
Europe,
close to literal poop as you can
prior.
figuratively get.
And so this immense frustration by the time you hit the 1970s is really evident at all of the work of the period. And so they settled on a strategy of the long march through the institutions. They realized that they couldn't set off bombs in the U.S. Capitol as they tried to.
So this is the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory now he's going into. It was called cultural Bolshevism in the Third Reich, and they meant Jews. Even though it was Bolshevism, they meant Jewish people. This is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that he's like laundering with academic window dressing right now.
And just rehashing.
Yep.
To do, or assassinate police officers, shooting them in the back of the head at point blank range in New York City, as they had done a number of times. But they actually formulated a new, more sophisticated, and frankly very successful strategy of
and before he mentions the Frankfurt School,
abandoning hope that the lumpen proletariat, so the outcasts of society, people who were truly the downtrodden and forgotten remnants of the American class system, they really abandoned hope that they could be part of this revolution. They said, we're going to go a revolution of the intelligentsia, a revolution of elites, by seizing control of not of the means of production. You'd be hard-pressed to get some academics running a factory line in Detroit, but through the means of culture and knowledge production. And so what you see is these washed-up radicals in the 60s, 70s, really 80s, migrating into academia. And then bringing their ideas, for example, in the 1970s, out of the radical manifestos, the Marxist-Leninist revolutionary manifestos, and into formalized academic work. What I've done, we're going to fast forward, we have a little bit limited amount of time, but what I've done in the last 2 years is report on the state of our institutions today. I've looked at the federal government, I've looked at the universities, I've looked at Fortune 100 companies, and I've looked at K through 12 schools. And what I found is something that I think is shocking to most Americans. You're taking the core concepts that were developed in that period after 1968. They've been sanitized, adapted, repackaged, and repurposed, and then injected into American life at the lateral bureaucratic and institutional level. So you have an idea that seems somewhat frivolous, maybe somewhat ridiculous, like white privilege, that's being taught.
Like, how is that ridiculous?
Yeah. In what way is that frivolous or ridiculous?
I feel like this guy, that's an example of like, that's just a throwaway thing, right? It's like some throwaway red meat for like the audience he's trying to reach.
Yeah, he's not making an argument that is ridiculous. He's just assuming that everyone agrees that's ridiculous. Yeah, and we don't agree.
It's just a throwaway. It's like when you throw away a pitch to, like, I don't know, calm yourself down or whatever, like in baseball. Is that how they do it in baseball? I don't know. I'm not a baseball historian.
Well, you might purposefully walk someone. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess so. But this, I don't know. Maybe this is not like being a pitcher. Maybe I'll just stop.
To kids as young as 7, 8, 9 years old, that children in a classroom can be separated into oppressor and oppressed based on identity categories, based on skin color, and then deemed oppressor and oppressed. And then the kids in the public classroom, let's say in Cupertino, California, they recently did this for third graders, should atone for their white privilege.
Wait, no. I had a teacher do this in elementary school too. Stuck all the kids with fucking blue eyes in one part of the classroom and was super nice to them, and stuck all the kids with brown eyes in the other part of the classroom and was kind of like not as nice to them. And then some of the kids started noticing, why are you being more harsh to us, over here on this side of the classroom? And then he explained that it's because their fucking eyes are brown, and then they got mad, and he's like, well, you should be, because that's what racism is like. He's like, now everybody can go back to their normal seats, and we can get back to our history lesson. And the history lesson was about the fucking Civil War. It's one of the best teachers I ever had, and it was like a 5th grade teacher.
It's actually a good lesson.
Right.
Like, it is a demonstration of racism. I mean, you see this all the time in like a bunch of shows where like they'll have some ridiculous, they'll meet some alien culture and they have some ridiculous thing that they're racist about. I think there was an early Star Trek episode, one of like the original series, where like everyone on the planet was half black and half white, like half dark skinned, half light skinned. And there were obviously two different factions of people and they hated each other. And the crew couldn't tell what's going on. And finally they asked, like, why do you guys hate each other? You're all like the same. And one of them explained, oh, no, we're dark skinned on the left side. They're dark skinned on the right side.
Right. And this exercise isn't new. And the teacher might have done it in a less clever way than my teacher, who did it in a super clever way and even got the kids mad about it. And then explained. The
teacher might have done it in a poor way.
What?
The teacher might have done it in a objectively bad way.
Right. But they were still trying to explain the same thing.
That's the problem with that particular way of teaching the lesson. It's not a problem with the lesson itself.
Right. And it's not a new lesson.
Yeah.
Some of it seems a little goofy. It seems a little bit ridiculous. But the origins of white privilege theory, again, were from 1968. It was a Marxist-Leninist theory. The idea is that you'd have to break down working class notions of white privilege in order for them to join the Marxist revolution. And so the purpose and the origins of a lot of these ideas, as you go down the line, all emerges from that point and now has been transferred through academic literature, through K through 12 pedagogy, through masters in education programs, through K through 12 curriculum modules, through HR programs, human resources departments at corporations. And I think what we find ourselves in is a maze of postmodern language that is the other element that is grafted onto the revolutionary rhetoric of 60, 70 years ago now. And it's a language of obfuscation.
This is incredibly painful. All this guy's doing is making Marxism sound better. By being like, you know, all them cool things that actually, like, where HR like might tell your coworker to fuck themselves if they're being racist and to stop doing it. That's Marxism. It's like, whoa, cool, really? All right, thanks. But again, we're not the audience for this.
It's a language of euphemism, and it's a language of demoralization.
Postmodernism is when euphemisms. I can't fucking believe this. It hasn't even gotten to the crazy part.
As many of you,
I disagree. It's all the crazy part.
Critical race theory. One of the fights that has been really going on for a year, almost to the point of absurdity, is this euphemistic game of, well, what is critical race theory? That's not critical race theory. Critical race theory is an obscure legal theory only found in upper division law school classes.
Yes.
Oh, well,
didn't he tweet about how he like redefined critical race theory?
Yes. To just mean
be whatever the fuck he wanted it to be.
To just mean anything that makes people.
That's him. He said that.
Yeah, I think he said specifically just to like brand anything that makes people kind of have the heebie-jeebies about race. Just brand that critical race theory. Yeah, he tweeted that out. It's still there. He hasn't even deleted it.
What the fuck? How can you say that after tweeting that?
Because he may be, listen, this guy may be a ghoul, but he's not stupid. He knows who he's talking to. And he knows what they're hearing when he's talking to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Critical race theory on the cover. It's using all the principles of critical race theory. That couldn't be. It couldn't exist. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so you get these ideas that are wrapped in language that is meant to obscure or meant to be impenetrable or unopposable. I think none of us, very few people, certainly in the United States and to a lesser extent, but also in the world, would oppose diversity in the true sense of the word, meaning having a variety of experiences, interacting with a different variety of people. This is why Americans...
I'm pretty sure a lot of Americans would oppose that. Specifically that definition of diversity.
And like, what are the variety of experiences? Like, you know what I mean? There's a variety of experiences out there, but there are some people who maybe don't want to interact with people who've had the experience of kissing a same-sex partner. You know what I'm saying? But they'll have a discussions and interactions with people with a diversity of other experiences. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, I'm sure there are a bunch of Americans who would totally disagree that that's what they want.
And he's going to try to like separate a couple things out here. I think he's going to try to separate your identity from your experience, right? I think if he's smart, that's what he'll try to do here. And you generally can't separate your identity from your experience. Your identity isn't your whole experience, but it's not just off over here separate from your experience either. Like, it can't be.
Mm-hmm. Your identity is part of your experience.
It almost definitionally has to be.
Yeah. Unless you like only exist ethereally, I guess. I don't know. I don't know anyone who only exists ethereally.
You want to get a diversity of perspective and culture, opinion, history. That's not what it means in practice, though. The next term, equality, or equity rather, it appeals to this idea that's a homonym with equality, and yet the significance of it is the exact opposite. Equality is the idea that each individual should be protected under the law, regardless of characteristics that might be grouping them into, that might be separating them into different groups or categories. This idea that no matter who you are, where you come from, you'll be treated equally under the law. Equity takes the opposite view. It would replace the system of individual rights with a system of group identity-based rights. And that your merit or your worth or your position or the material resources that are divided and then distributed should be based not on your individual potential or character or work or accomplishment, but based on your group identity. That is, takes no account of your individual characteristics or excellence.
No, wait. What if both? Yeah, what about both?
I missed it.
Yeah, you weren't listening. All right, we'll continue.
Sorry.
And so what I've tried to do in my reporting is to surface all of these very dense and very euphemistic phrases and terms that you're probably seeing popping up everywhere. You're probably seeing it at work. You might be seeing it in your kids' K through 12 school curriculum. You're certainly seeing it in the political sphere. And our federal government is absolutely saturated with it. And it's trying to make heads or tails. It's trying to make sense of this language. It's trying to get to the heart of what these words mean. Because I think that only then you can truly have a sense of how you can defeat it, how you can fight back. Because what I've seen over and over in my reporting, looking at original source documents, is that every elite institution in the country that has dominance over knowledge, dominance over culture, dominance over even, in many cases, material production, has converged on a unitary ideology. It's really a remarkable thing. The HR training program at Walmart, for example, is the same as the 5th grade education module in Buffalo Public Schools.
What?
It's the same as the diversity and inclusion training program.
I don't think that's true.
At the Department of the Treasury in Washington, D.C.
What the fuck?
Examples from our
well,
reporting.
wait,
and it's a very
one of those things is not like the other two things. I don't think that they're teaching kids how to be like good employees and how to embrace employment diversity, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I'm sure what he means to say, or what he's saying to his audience is that there's some anti-racist stuff in some 5th grade class in Buffalo, which is sure, why not? And that it's just the same fucking thing, right? It's more everything we don't like is just the same fucking thing. It's like you said that he tweeted. We're just going to make everything makes people on the, I would say conservatives uncomfortable talking about race. We're just going to call it all critical race theory, say it's all the same thing, and then we can just say it's all bad. And that's not sort of what he just did there. That's exactly what he just did what he told you he was going to do in the tweet.
I mean, if that's what he means, then I think that's a good thing. I think we should be teaching children to not be racist. And we should be teaching employees to not be racist. Let's do both, please.
List of concepts derived in this case from critical race theory that says the United States is fundamentally and irredeemably a racist country. The country today is saturated through with systemic racism.
Say that.
Some critical race theorist probably said that. But it's like
that it is irredeemably a racist country.
Some critical race theorist probably said that. Sure.
Okay, well, I would disagree. And
well, that's fine, and that's it's interesting that you disagree, because the thing is, like, some car mechanic also said to use a different kind of oil than some other car mechanic. It turns out that within different fields of study, be they esoteric legal fields to very hands-on sort of things like fixing stuff, you're going to have different people who think different things, and they might even fucking disagree with each other publicly and have arguments about it and shit, it turns out. So there are probably critical race theorists who disagree with the statement that you disagree with, right? Because it's a field with people in it that probably have different perspectives.
Yeah, I would agree with the first part, that it is fundamentally a racist country because of our laws. Like, we have laws that are, I should say the laws by the letter aren't necessarily racist, but their effects and their intent is racist. Like, they were passed with a racist intent and they have racist effects. If you read the black and white letters, it may not be racist, but like, that doesn't really matter. What matters is its effect.
Right. The most obvious one was, and it's been repealed, thankfully, at least at the federal level, was that, if I had, a few grams of coke and a black person had another person, had a few grams of crack, the person with the crack would go to jail for longer than the person with the coke. But the effect of that was all the white guys in the financial district who were doing coke to make more money, to do more coke, to make more money, to do more coke, were getting a much less harsh sentence if they got pulled over and a little bit of coke got found in the trunk of their BMW. Whereas somebody, in what they would call the inner city at the time, they got found with a little bit of crack, same amount as the stockbroker with the coke, they'd go to jail for years. And the same amount of what is essentially the same substance. So that's like an example of a law that is not written down in a racist way, but that the effects were so clearly racist that it got overturned.
Yeah. So like, if that, like, that's not the only example of that. There are tons of laws, and throughout the history of the United States of America, there are so many laws that are like that. And you can't look at that and say that that is not a fundamental part of the country. Like, the country fundamentally is racist, but is it irredeemably racist? I wouldn't say yes, but I also wouldn't say no. I'd say I'm unconvinced either way.
Okay.
I could see there being, like, I could, imagine a future where the country has redeemed itself.
So I think we're getting a little bogged down here, but the point is that he just read one person saying one thing, and he's like painting the whole thing with it. The whole diversity and inclusion movement, all of critical race theory, probably everybody who listens to this podcast, everybody who's ever been on it, fucking everybody I like on Twitter, we all think, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's one person's thing that they wrote in one place, and he's trying to universalize it and make it, he's doing what he said in the tweet.
Yeah. I think that particularly is called a sweeping generalization. I'm not certain, but that kind of argument saying, this entire field thinks this thing because here's one example of it. I think that's a sweeping generalization.
In the racial categorization of citizens in the here and now, it can be divided on the axis of oppressor and oppressed based on race. And people who are deemed white or in some cases white enough, like Asian Americans, strangely, you have to atone for your privilege. You have to bankrupt your privilege. And then if you want to be reaccepted back into society after that process, you have to submit to the political ideology that regards not freedom and equality, not the Constitution, not the principle of equal protection, not even the system of individual rights, but moving to a system of collective group-based rights, moving to a system that is explicitly anti-capitalist. You have organizations, for example, like American Express, preaching that capitalism is fundamentally racist. American Express, teaching that capitalism is fundamentally racist.
You said that twice. You all right? You all right, dude?
Is he going to say it again?
So forth. And one of the
I don't think it got the reaction that he was expecting.
How is this even possible? I'm sorting through documents from 5,000 different sources all over the country, from every kind of institution.
But that's actually not a lot of different sources if you consider the breadth of the thing he's describing. If it was just critical race theory, okay, maybe that's kind of a lot of sources, but he's expanded it out just now to like anybody who has written anything maybe about diversity and inclusion. And so that now you've expanded it out so far that 5,000 sources ain't shit.
I mean, you could probably find 5,000 sources on just like diversity training.
Right. That's what I'm saying is like,
and he's clearly included that.
Right. So it ain't shit.
Yeah.
It's not like it wasn't a lot of work for just one person, but just because something was a lot of work for one person doesn't mean that it's like universally applicable. That's why we have teams of people working on important things for the most part. Oh no.
From all walks of life. How is it possible that it's been distilled down to these key, say, 7 to 10 ideas?
Oh, that's because you've been doing that. It's Ruffo. You've been picking the ones that it's easiest to either mischaracterize or use as dog whistles. You took the 7 or 10 of your favorites that you could use like that, and now you're talking about it in that way, Chris Ruffo. That's how it got distilled down like this, you dumb fuck. Oh my God. How'd this monster get here, said Dr. Frankenstein.
That are then implanted into the organizations through the bureaucracy. So it's either the DEI bureaucracy, that's kind of the most common one now. Human resources is another one. There's all sorts of different euphemisms that get constantly created and recreated. But the ideology is the same.
But human resources it's a euphemism. It's oftentimes a euphemism for you fired. That's what human resources does a lot of, is firing people.
Yeah.
And that's an exclusionary behavior. Once you're fired, you've been excluded. So it's not really diversity and inclusion, is it? Oh my God.
And the ideology is really
like, is he mad that HR exists, or just that HR, like, what they think an HR violation is, he disagrees with?
That's the thing, is it doesn't matter. Like, that's, you know what I'm saying? He's never, that's unimportant, right?
Yeah.
It's we talk about this a little bit. We talk about this a little bit on the show, actually, like regularly. It's that the people that need to hear what they need to hear are hearing what they need to hear.
Yeah.
At its essence, from a lot of those materials that we saw in 1968. And so the question is, what can we do to fight back? I'm going to talk about tactics, and then I'm going to talk about strategy.
Those are the same thing.
Tactics, I've been tasked and asked to talk a little bit about a story that I broke last week while I was teaching the journalism students here at Hillsdale College about a company called Walt Disney. So any news watchers in the room? Yeah, okay. So you've probably heard about this scandal, really, with the Walt Disney Company. I've actually been reporting on Walt Disney for more than a year, off and on.
You have no idea what he's about to say, do you?
I think I do.
He's gonna. Oh, dude, I don't think so.
I have some good sources
maybe
inside
I don't.
the company. I broke a story last year that Walt Disney Company was forcing employees to engage in a critical race theory training program, which denounced the United States as a fundamentally racist country, asked its white employees to complete a white privilege checklist, and then advocated for all of the fashionable causes. I believe they had exercises in there to decolonize your bookshelf, whatever that means, and any kind of these pedagogical techniques or kind of fashionable self-reflection exercises that you see in all of these corporations. Disney was doing it. After I broke the story, Disney's first attempt was to deflect. They sent out this amazing press release, actually. They said, because people were criticizing, they said, this is racist. You're dividing your employees along the basis of race. They've created racially segregated employee groups, employee activist groups. They're denouncing the country. They're denouncing a large part of their employees and their customers on the basis of skin color. And Disney said in a press release, no, we can't be racist. We made the movie Black Panther.
That's not what they said. There's no way they said that.
Bizarre corporate variation on the...
No, the entire company said that. Like the company with its company mouth moved its company face to say that. Disney made the movie Pocahontas,
which was pretty racist.
Yeah. But like, if you want an example of Disney saying the white man is the oppressor,
I have black friends. It was really a kind of ridiculous moment where they were caught, you could see between the lines of the press release, totally off guard. Because in the elite milieu, this is something that is not even questioned. In fact, the Disney employees who leaked me these documents and then the video said, you cannot question it. You can't say a word. You have to be silent. This is the new orthodoxy. It's the orthodoxy in every elite institution. If you want to keep your job, you have to shut up.
Yes, if you want to keep your job at places that require you to take certain kinds of training, you have to take the training. Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
Although I would often miss mine for like, it's not on your calendar. It's in some like weird section that you have to go to and take, and then they'll like email you about it. And I never check my emails. And I was always like super late on them at every one of my job, and they didn't even care.
Disney eventually.
So it's not like they're like gonna fire you if you don't take it right away.
Entire program from their internal website. So a big victory for me. That's always fun. But of course, these things get deleted temporarily, but they always resurface, because it's not that it was well-intentioned people, that they made a mistake, or they had a document in their server or part of their training program that they didn't agree with. These things are baked into the bureaucracy. And so last week I was sent a series...
Wait, how does he know that the people aren't well-intentioned?
It's because they're... I don't know, remember that shit he was talking about in the 60s and how step 5 they invaded Disney? Do you remember? Remember how he explained that to you?
They were planning this since the 60s.
Right.
Is that the last step, or is there something beyond Disney?
It just says step. I just know it was step 5, man. I don't know. I made that shit up, dude. What are you talking about?
I'm just yes-anding you.
Okay, cool enough.
An hour and 40 minutes approximately of Disney's internal meetings regarding its very political and very public fight with the governor of Florida, a man named Ron DeSantis, who signed a bill, I think very simple bill, that simply said you have to keep education on gender ideology, sexual orientation, and sexuality out of the classroom between the ages of kindergarten and 3rd grade. This seems fairly common sense. I think it has, depending on the polling question.
So there's like nuance to it. It also says like it has to be age appropriate when you talk to it or something, and that's not strictly defined. So it's just kind of whatever you want. You know, if you as a parent could decide like, oh, I don't want my kid ever learning about gay people, and as soon as they come home and it was like, oh, my teacher said today that, you know, he had a great weekend with his husband, that teacher's in trouble now.
Or potentially is in trouble, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, this is gonna take a turn, dude. Check this out.
60 and 80% support, an overwhelming number of Americans. But the activist groups within Disney were furious because they believe that Disney, as the world's largest entertainment corporation, certainly the largest entertainment corporation in human history regarding kids' entertainment, they believe that they were the moral voice on children and sexuality, and that they wanted to not only oppose the legislation, but use all of the levers of corporate power to fundamentally reshape the narrative about kids and sexuality. And so I released a series of videos last week that had, for example, an executive producer saying that she was deliberately, with the support of her colleagues, inserting what she called a, quote, not-so-secret gay agenda into kids' programming, targeting kids as young as 2 years old. Another Disney employee, a production coordinator, said that he had created a tracking program to make sure that the company was including enough transgender, non-binary, and asexual characters. I think I have those terms right. And this whole series of statements, which you might imagine happening at maybe the Women's Studies Department at Vassar College, but I think rightly concerned a lot of people when it was high-level executives saying we are going to fundamentally change the relationship between kids and sexuality in the United States by reshaping that, by engineering a narrative based on gender ideology. We're going to do so really secretly. They didn't make an announcement about this. While at the same time, we're going to be publicly opposing any legislation that would provide a restriction on this in public schools. And so this was, in short, I think, a scandal for Disney. They were very tough. They were kind of chest-beating executives, had gone out prior to this story, saying what they were going to do, talking trash to the governor, committing to overthrowing this bill and overturning it. And then after they were really pummeled, I think Fox News mentioned this story 300 times in 24 hours at one point last week.
Okay, that sounds like Fox News.
Yeah. So, like, my question would be, let's say a third grader comes up to their teacher and asks, like, hey, my uncle used to be my aunt, and I don't understand. Can you explain that to me? Why should it be illegal for the teacher to explain that to a kid? Like, what's wrong about knowing that?
I mean, people can check my Twitter. I've been like over and over this and like sex education and how kids are. I want to kind of stay focused on what Ruffo is talking about here because it's kind of a long video and I want to try to get through most of it for the pod.
But yeah, like Disney's in the right here.
New York Times wrote about it.
Rare.
They said this was all fine until Chris Ruffo got a hold of it. Tried to blame me for it. And then the company went fairly silent. I think it probably also has something to do with those poll numbers we talked about, where a huge majority of not just Florida voters, but American voters, American adults, said, hey, wait a minute, this is too much. We don't want to have gender ideology being taken from the university, being forced on kindergartners behind the backs of parents without informing them about what's going on. And this is something we've seen over and over and over, whether it's critical race theory or gender ideology. And so I think we've struck quite a blow. Disney was trending on Twitter, which is, I think, a kind of a distorted approximation for what's in the news in some ways, for an entire week. You had conservatives boycotting, canceling Disney subscriptions. Anyone cancel a Disney subscription in the last week? Okay, good. That's at least $500 a month or whatever. You had a lot of people canceling, and I think you had a lot of Americans really raising questions. What's happening with our institutions? What's happening with kids? I also discovered that, playing a bit of hardball, when a company enters the political debate on the issues of children and sexuality, my argument was that, well, we should actually examine their record on children and sexuality. And to my somewhat surprise, I found out that the Walt Disney Company has had a notorious pattern, at least once a year for the last decade, and then before that as well, of having employees arrested for child sex crimes.
Disney is a massive fucking company.
Yeah, the Disney Corporation and its subsidiaries probably employ like millions of people.
Hundreds of thousands at least. And
I don't think you know how many subsidiaries Disney has.
Right, but I just want to like kind of stay focused on what he's saying. I think he said the Disney Corporation, right? I don't think if he said it, it's subsidiaries, but he's going to make the case here. I think he's like, oh, they had employees that were, convicted of these kinds of crimes. Well, once your organization becomes sufficiently big, the odds become greater and greater that every year somebody who works for you, unfortunately, is going to be arrested or convicted of one of these kinds of crimes.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is maybe Disney hires them knowing that they're committing those crimes. I don't really know what he's saying.
Well, he hasn't finished saying it yet.
Child pornography, child exploitation, child rape, etc. And not only that, that's obviously bad enough. It appears from the coverage that it is a disproportionate number. The Polk County Sheriff, who's adjacent to Disney's operations in Orlando, Florida, it seems like every time he does a sex sting, he nabs at least a few Disney employees. Disproportionate, I would imagine, based on the limited evidence, to their rate in the labor force. And so my point is that when a company is claiming the moral high ground on these issues of children and sexuality,
is it actually disproportionate to other companies?
I would also, he said disproportionate to the labor force, but he didn't. Is it disproportionate to their place in the labor force in the county where the sheriff he's talking about? You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's right next to like where Disney is, like one of their big corporate offices or whatever, I bet a big proportion of the people in that fucking county work for the Disney Corporation.
Yeah. I would want to know, like, compared to other companies of the same size, is there anything special about Disney?
Right. But like,
I guess there might even be, because like,
also this is just an anecdote this is just an anecdote from some sheriff he supposedly talked to.
Yeah. But like I was going to say, I think maybe there might even be, because of like the kind of company Disney is. Like maybe there's more than there would be in like, I don't know, an offshore drilling company.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that like what he's doing here is he's playing tricks with what he's saying. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I don't have the data available about offshore drilling and child sex crimes versus the Disney Corporation, right?
Yeah,
I just don't have the data, so I'm not. I don't. But I just. Oh, again, you can't go through and fact check every one of his claims, but being able to notice the tricks that he's doing, where he just started with an anecdote about a sheriff, and then all the busts in one county, and then he tried to like universalize it to the whole workforce based on an anecdote about a single county.
And I'm I doubt that he cites his sources.
A sheriff told him. What are you talking about? The sheriff of Nottingham.
Is that the same as citing your sources?
Responsible for everything their employees do on their own time. But I also found a few stories as well. Disney, for example, Disney authorities allegedly told their cruise ship security guard to keep her mouth shut when she discovered that one of the Disney employees was molesting a young boy on the cruise ship, which allowed him to evade arrest. And then Disney flew him back home to India, so he couldn't
allegedly
be accountable. And also, the Disney's Cruise Ship Lobbyist Association, the trade association, of which Disney is a member, had advocated against, had opposed, and then significantly watered down legislation that would have required Disney and other cruise lines to report sexual abuse on its cruise ships in a timely and stringent manner.
But that's not just Disney. That's a whole ass cruise ship trade association lobbying Congress. And I'm let me tell you something about like a trade association. They lobby against every fucking bit of regulation that comes across the fucking Congress people's desk regarding their industry.
But you're not saying that that's a good thing.
No, I'm just saying that's what they do. That's how they do.
You're just saying it's not evidence for Chris's point here.
Right. It could have been any legislation, and any regulation, they would lobby against it because that's why the cruise ship companies pay the trade association. It's to lobby lawmakers to vote down regulation of all kinds. See, I told you this was pretty pilled, dude.
Yeah.
So I think the lesson of this is that the institutions in the United States that have adopted these ideologies cannot be appeased. They can't be easily shifted from within. They've been captured at the bureaucratic level. And Disney has the perfect case study. Disney executives have delegated moral authority within the company and political authority within the company to internal activist organizations, whether they're in the race and sex segregated identity caucuses or in the human resources departments. And so what it's going to require is not a long march through the institutions. I think most conservatives don't have the ambition of one day being a diversity and equity director at a public school district, whatever that might look like. So the strategy is not to say, well, let's march back in. Let's have a kind of counter march. I think the strategy is quite different. It's an actual siege strategy. It's from the outside, and it's taking on our superior public support. Because whether it's critical race theory or gender ideology in schools, for example, we have about a 2-to-1 margin, the public supporting our position and opposing the position of the institutions. These institutions don't choose these ideologies democratically. You didn't vote for it. I didn't vote for it. They're imposed anti-democratically by fiat through bureaucratic, not democratic rule.
If he's talking about corporations, well, yeah, that's because we're capitalism. Like,
yeah.
Is he suggesting that the people seize the means of production? It doesn't seem like the thing that he would suggest.
Corporations generally aren't democracies. Certainly in America.
And so if he's talking about the school boards and shit, so those people are generally elected school board members. Universities, it's a bit more of a bureaucratic thing, but some of those are private too. But I'm really interested. What does he mean we have to lay siege to these people?
I think what he means is he wants Republicans at every level in the education system. Like he wants Republicans in charge of how elementary school kids are taught, Republicans in charge of how middle school kids are taught, Republicans in charge all the way up through, colleges. He wants Republicans in charge of how college kids are taught. He doesn't want any educational institute to be run by non-Republicans. I mean, that's essentially his stated goal. I think
as the
right?
first step is a narrative and symbolic war against companies like Disney, for one example. You have to be very aggressive. You have to fight on terms that you define. You have to create your own frame, your own language. And you have to be ruthless and brutal in pursuit of something good. The second strategy is mobilizing popular support. We're seeing this at school board level. After the reporting that I did and some other colleagues had then picked up on about critical race theory in public schools, I saw this amazing emergence organically of irate parents coming home from work, tired in their dress clothes, showing up at those school board meetings and giving hell to those school board officials. Did you see any of these videos?
Yeah, repeating the lies.
Yeah.
And we know for a fact that these parents didn't know what was happening in the classroom. They never voted or approved of this.
They still don't know what's happening in the classroom.
They were livid.
Some of them weren't even parents.
Getting mobilized on that grassroots level to oppose this kind of ideological capture in those K through 12 school districts. And when they won't listen, which is much of the time, parents who have organized and run campaigns are winning overwhelming elections. We're talking 70-30. If you put your name on the ballot in the median school districts in the United States, and you say, I'm the anti-critical race theory candidate, I'm going to get our education system back to the basics of reading, writing, math, etc., prioritizing excellence.
Notice how he didn't say history or science?
Does he think that like students don't learn more than just reading and writing and math?
It's the history and the science stuff a lot of that he's going to have a problem with, I'm thinking.
Yeah. But even more than that, like students learn like things in the arts.
Oh no, that's bad.
There's language. What does he mean by the basics?
Again, like he's not going to tell you, but he doesn't have to because this grift has been working so well for him that he can be fairly vague and people will fill in the fucking blanks with the things they want it to
like,
be.
Is
talking
studying
about.
the Civil War part of the basics?
He didn't say history.
Or is that CRT?
Man, he didn't say history, did he?
Yeah.
Over ideology, you're going to win in many places at that 70-30 level. I think reflecting overwhelming public support. And I think the third step then is to decentralize. Because a lot of these problems emerge because of centralization, because of bureaucratic rule, because of control by a minority of permanently publicly subsidized activists that have turned public institutions into private ideological organizations. And I think when you look at schools as another good example, we can talk about universities maybe if we have a little time, but when you talk about schools, there's no reason that if you're a parent, you don't have the means, let's say, to send your kid to private school or parochial school, that you should be stuck in a public school based on your zip code, that violates your child's right to conscience, that shames or demoralizes your child on the basis of race or identity, and that you're allowed no recourse through the bureaucracy and no escape mechanism. There's no reason why we can't have, for example, universal school choice, so that a family that says, you know what, this isn't for me, this violates our family's values at a deep level, shouldn't be able to take that average of $15,000 a year and move it wherever they want.
Yep, that's the fucking. That's the meat right here. He wants to kill public schools.
Yeah, he wants the school voucher thing. What is it like? You know, you take money out of public schools and you put them into these private and like charter schools. And yeah, they're for-profit schools.
And I'm sorry, I thought the point of education was to, in some cases, challenge people and make them uncomfortable, make them consider new things in a new way.
How dare you think that? You clearly weren't educated correctly.
Could be another public school, could be a charter school, could be a private school. This is controversial, I don't know why, but could also be to a religious school. Because
that's not controversial, that's just illegal.
Why that's controversial.
That's just illegal, actually.
He doesn't know why that's controversial, so he's never read the Constitution.
Have 90% of public school of American school children attending public schools. You have 90% of American university students attending public universities. You have a monopoly that unless it's broken up, unless parents are given more power, more freedom, more options, more choice, they're going to be forced to run their kids through a gauntlet that they can't control. And so I think if you categorize them all together, to summarize very briefly, you're engaging in a narrative war. I mentioned earlier that there's this kind of postmodern layering on top of all of our institutions to turn the, let's say, revolutionary ideology into something very gauzy, very vague, very seductive, very attractive, soft language. We have to rip that veil off of really what's happening and show Americans through reporting, through information, through investigation, through public records requests, etc., exactly what's happening. And we have to fight at that narrative and symbolic level. We live in an information society. And if we are unilaterally outmanned on that front, it's impossible to gain traction. Someone could go to the school board meeting and literally not have the words to oppose what's happening. And so that's what I've tried to do, what others are doing.
I've given them a script and told them to yell it.
Providing people a kind of key into explaining beyond the euphemism exactly what's happening, what those words mean, ripping the cover off of that language.
I mean, I'd love it if like all of these people would bring in the parts of their students' lessons, like whatever part of the textbook or whatever part of the homework that they disagree with, bring it in and show it. Say, I disagree with this part of the textbook right here where it says this. But they won't do that because they don't disagree with the textbook. They don't disagree with the lessons.
They haven't read them.
They disagree with the lies that they're being fed.
So also important here is that in a thing like a public school, each individual person doesn't get to decide what gets taught to their kid. That's stupid.
Yeah, if you want that, homeschool your kid.
But also please don't do that, because it's like the important part of school is that the kids learn to deal with other kids who are different than them. So
yeah, I don't want to like rag on homeschool kids, because homeschooling kids can be fine, but generally the outcomes aren't as good as public schools.
But it's just this idea that like that you should just be able to go in there and dictate what's being taught in the classroom. But then the problem is there's fucking 29 other kids in that classroom, and those kids' parents maybe have a different idea what should be being taught in the classroom. Then what do you do?
Also, let's say every single parent has decided that they want their kid taught something that's not true. The teacher would have an ethical problem teaching that. The school would have an ethical problem telling the teacher to teach that, because it's not fucking true.
This is fucked. This is fucked. But this is the same thing. Remember when people were like, oh, you got to teach the controversy about evolution. Same fucking shit. Same shit.
Moral language to be waging the fight, not within the confines of the opposition's framing, but by creating a new frame. And so with critical race theory, for example, it creates an entirely new frame. You're fighting substantively, accurately, but also with language that you can point to. You can go to a school board meeting you can explain, and you can oppose. And the evidence shows that from polling data that's been done kind of sequentially over the last 18 months, 18 months ago, let's say 2 years ago, round up, 0% of the American people knew about critical race theory. In the last 18 months, we've brought that number up to 75% of the American people. And we've turned it into a 2-to-1 issue, which in politics, I don't know, many of you are in politics. If you go to, say, let's say a campaign manager and you say, hey, we have a 2-to-1 issue. They're going to be salivating and drooling.
You see, here, wait, pause this for a second, because this is like the meat of the problem right here with this guy, is like, he's right. Essentially, 0 people knew what CRT was because it wasn't being taught in public schools. It was a niche thing, and he's taken it, and he's convinced, like, what did he say, 75% of the population that CRT means something that it never did.
He's claiming that 75% of people have this view, right? If he is to be taken seriously. I remember there was a time, it was during, I think, 2012 election, that Fox News had a bunch of people riled up about Saul Alinsky. And then when those people, I don't forget what, it was like a Colbert Report type thing where they went and asked people what they thought about Saul Alinsky, and the Fox viewers were like, oh, we don't like him. And then after that, they said, who is Saul Alinsky? And the people had no fucking idea. I know who Saul Alinsky is. He wrote Rules for Radicals. It's a great fucking book. There's a fucking cool post-punk song about it too. But that's because I'm kind of interested in that stuff. But nobody knew who the fuck it was. And so that's the same fucking playbook. It's like riling people up about some shit that they don't know anything about. And then how do you argue with that? If you're like a retired teacher who's now on the school board, how do you argue with somebody who's frothing at the mouth about something that the retired school teacher doesn't understand and the person frothing at the mouth doesn't understand? Almost nobody in that room has any background on the fucking thing they're yelling about, right? Like there might be like somebody in the room who knows a little bit about it, maybe, but nobody knows anything about it, but the people there are pissed. So how do you argue with that? It's like a perfect like propaganda technique.
Yeah. I mean, it's a brilliant strategy if you have absolutely no morals. Like if you don't give a one single iota of shit about ethics, it is the perfect strategy to employ to fool an entire nation full of people. Like if that's your goal, is to trick people into giving what you want, and you have no ethics, there you go. This is the playbook.
And then like the problem here is there aren't enough critical race theorists to go around, right? To go out there and like dispel some of this crap. There just aren't enough of them. Yeah. There's just not enough critical race theorists to go around. So you can't, like, what are you going to do? What do you just hope this blows over? No, because he's starting to kind of intermingle it with that fucking QAnon shit about grooming and shit. Sort of trying to tie that weird shit together, that weird satanic panic shit. And like the gay panic and shit.
Calling it and it's immediately.
It seems to be affecting, it seems to be effecting real laws. Like his lies effect real laws that actually harm people.
That's a decisive victory in a otherwise fairly evenly divided society. The second is to attack the credibility of institutions. This is something that I think conservatives have been rightly hesitant to do for many years. Well, we like our institutions. I think conservatives are really realizing now we like what our institutions were, we like what we imagined them to be, and now that we are seeing what they are, we don't like them as much. And so, luckily, the institutions are really doing this to themselves. You see trust in all of our institutions cratering. I think it's foolhardy to say, well, we really want to just raise that number. I think you want to create the conditions for fundamental structural change, to appropriate some language. For example, school choice. To get universal school choice, you really need to operate from a premise of universal public school distrust.
I wonder if he's just like getting, massive payments from the charter school lobby.
Maybe not them.
All this.
Maybe not them directly, but he works for a think tank.
Okay.
So yes, he's getting payments from
the money is flowing in from them.
Right. He's getting payments from the kinds of people or the kinds of organizations that are going to be in favor of charter school, or what he would call, charter school choice. Although a lot of charter schools are going to teach the shit he doesn't like too. So he's probably not too big on charter schools because there is public oversight of those. And that's probably some shit he's not into,
I don't think he cares about what's actually being taught.
In order for people to
I think he cares about the money.
Action, they have to feel like they have something at stake. I think that the public schools have done a remarkable job at doing that, specifically the public school teachers unions. They shut down schools for more than a year. In some districts, half of all kids never showed up to online learning. They've had the most catastrophic learning loss likely since World War II. They kept kids masked for years while the adults traveled around the world with no mask on.
Huh?
And the teachers union endorsed promoting critical race theory in all 14,000 local school districts.
What?
And I think finally, and
mask mandates applied to everyone.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. While the adults flew all over the world, like what the fuck does that even mean?
I don't know.
Was the second grade teacher, Mrs. Pennington, making the kids wear a mask on the Zoom meeting while she was in the fucking French Riviera? I mean, what the fuck is he talking about?
I have no idea. I've seen a lot of those like Zoom meeting, like the little clips from the Zoom meetings that something funny happens and the kids weren't wearing masks. They were in their home.
It's just red meat. Again, it doesn't matter, right? He brought up the masks. That's what's important. People are going to take that away. Like the people he's trying to reach with this will take that away because that's their bugaboo. And that's why they're yelling at the school board,
Yeah, but like the kids that were going to schools, if the school had a mask mandate, it wasn't for just the kids. Like the teachers had to follow the mask mandate too, and the administrators. Like, is that what he thinks? I mean, it's just a lie, but is that what he thinks his audience thinks?
It's the red meat, I'm telling you, right? It's just the thing about the mask. It doesn't really matter what words he put around it, I don't think, so much.
Yeah.
As long as he was signaling to them
right.
that they're right about the mask, and that's another reason they should be righteously angry at the school board.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think that in a dynamic society like the society that we have, we also have the opportunity and the responsibility to create alternatives. And in many cases, I think many of us have, and many parents, for example, I include myself in this for a while, not anymore.
Wait, why? You're not a parent anymore?
Complacent.
Uh-oh.
Well, I'll kind of send my kids to school, should be fine, kind of like what I had.
Did he lose custody?
Or maybe he put his kids in private school. Maybe his kids are just no longer in public school.
Okay.
I don't think that's a realistic option for people anymore. And when I talk to parents, for example, all over the country, they're desperate for new ideas, new options. You have now 5 million American kids in homeschool. There's just been an explosion in homeschooling. You have even the Hillsdale charter schools that are now expanding. Parents are desperate for intellectual entrepreneurship, in a sense, political entrepreneurship. Rather than just simply fighting about who gets what, actually creating something substantive that matches people's values. And so, before we take questions...
Oh, the questions are going to be fucking pilled. I think we'll do that during the post game, though.
Close by repeating the stakes.
We'll release that part of the post game.
Rather, I really think that the key dynamic for us to all be thinking about is not necessarily even a left versus right dynamic. It is that's important, but I think where the opportunity lies is really a top and bottom dynamic. So a kind of...
Wait a minute. I thought we weren't supposed to be talking about gay shit.
In the homosexual community, one's called the bottom, the other's called the top.
Elite class that represents a very small amount of people, that has positions of influence within the kind of knowledge-making institutions, within pedagogical institutions, that has designed and implemented and distributed all of these ideas that we're finding in the reporting, and the vast majority of the American people who are still attached to the idea that America is a force for good, that their kids should be protected from radical ideologies being imposed on them in the tender ages of elementary school, for example, and that our country, in some ways, has gone off the rails. And they want a sense of security.
Is he saying that America is not a force for good? Because I think his definition of CRT includes that. Is he teaching CRT right now?
That's a good question. But he is, I think you also may have like misunderstood or whatever. He is saying that most Americans believe the country is a force for good and that they're right and that they need to like take their place atop the institutions.
Okay.
They want a sense that people are fighting for them. And I really think there's a common intuition of all of the good that can still be...
Well, isn't it, if you think there's any problem with America at all, it's CRT, right?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. He certainly didn't say that.
He's implied it.
We get HK, we get the criticism we get is that we put words into people's mouth. That's the criticism we get. So if you start putting words into people's mouth, I'm going to push back
being
every
facetious,
time.
And I think it's obvious.
Institutions raised into our country, maybe not in the exact way that it looks now, but in the way that it could be. And so I really think it's up to all of us. You could be maybe on offense. There's some of us, I think me included, that really are just built for offense. And there's some that are built for creating institutions, for playing defense, for protecting the civilizational values and virtues that should be continued from the past into the future.
That's a dog whistle Western culture shit. Our values from the past. I know what that always means.
And I think that if we are just taking these two poles, these two systems, these two worldviews, we really have an option between the revolution of 1776 or the revolution of 1968. And I think one of them offers...
As a gay person, I'll take the revolution of 1968. Thank you.
The other revolution was a literal war.
Yeah, that too. Right, 68. The 60s were basically like a cultural and sexual revolution to the extent that that even happened the way that most people sort of romanticize it. You know?
Yeah.
Also, like the Civil Rights Act is just like fucking. It's like a main character that hasn't been mentioned in like what he's talking about.
Yeah.
It seems that there's a character here. It's Civil Rights Act, and he hadn't mentioned it, but it seems like it's probably the main character.
Yeah, he's pretty clearly upset about it.
Method for this incredible unfolding of those founding principles of freedom and equality, and the other one ends up in nihilism and despair and demoralization. It ends up in a bombed out bunker in Greenwich Village in the 1970s. And so...
A bombed out bunker in Greenwich Village? What the fuck is he talking about?
You got me.
That's the Village, by the way. The Village people are not happy with this guy.
I would suggest to you, even some of you who may not be temperamentally predisposed, that the best strategy in the immediate term is the siege of the institutions, and that we should.
Did he mean Stonewall when he said a bombed-out bunker in Greenwich Village, or was he dog whistling the Weather Underground? That bombed-out bunker is now $4.5 million, says the chat.
For the fight. Thank you so much.
All right, that's a good place to stop. We'll do because I like to keep the podcast under an hour and a half. We used to try to do an hour. That ship sailed, so we just extended that shit out to an hour and a half. Oh God. Yeah, the Civil Rights Act was like a main character in there whose name was not uttered once during that guy's talk.
Yeah. But he was pretty clearly implying that it was a revolution. Like essentially America went through a revolution, which I guess in a way you could say that, but he's saying it's bad. And I would disagree about that part.
When were the schools integrated? Was that also the 60s?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh. There's a few characters missing from this play. I mean, they're standing there. It's just that nobody's paying any attention to them.
Well, I mean, that's his whole thing. Like, he's describing all of that as CRT and saying that's bad. You know, teaching your child that this was the way America was and that's bad is bad.
There's just, like I said, man, there was a lot going on there too. And that shit he was talking about Disney, that shit was fucking starting to get over into some QAnon territory.
Yeah.
There's a big...
by the way, what I just described is not CRT. That was history.
Right. Yeah, of course. It was just, this is what happened. And then it's history, and then like applying some kind of moral judgment or moral framework to the deeds of the past. You'd be like, actually, we wouldn't do that today. We decided that shit's hella racist.
Yep.
Some of us anyway. Others of us go yell at the school board.
Hopefully most of us.
I'm going to go with some. A number of us. A number exceeding one. Because there's two of us here. But yeah, I'm just guessing some of these questions, I almost guaranteed the questions are going to be focused on Disney and like children being exposed to queer people. Like when we get to the question part of this in the post game, I think the questions are going to be heavily weighted in that direction, even though it was a very short part of his talk.
Yeah. And like the fact that all of this is just for him to like gain support for charter schools is pretty fucked up.
Right. Specifically, maybe the Hillsdale College set of charter schools that he mentioned a little while ago.
Possibly.
Yeah. Well, that's the show. HK, you want to read us out? I know you said you're not good at it, so we're gonna make it good at this.
I'm terrible at it, but I'll do it again. Well, thank you everybody for watching. We're here every week, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. for Intellectual Dollar Tree. And then Dave does several other shows over the week. And Dave, do you want to talk about some of the other shows?
Thursday. Always check out Thursday. It's Cults and the Satanic Panic. You figure the rest of it out yourself.
All right. If you want to follow us, you can go to echoplexmedia.com. And if you want to donate to us, patreon.com/ is it just Echoplex?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Patreon.com/ Echoplex. Thank you. Here's Boomers by Periscope.
Did you know Echoplex has a 24-hour stream? That's right. Check out our 24/7 music stream at echoplexmedia.com/live or at eplex.xyz. Our huge self-submitted local music library plays the best tunes the Bay Area has to offer, and commercial free, well, except for ours, and even by request. Check out the player on echoplexmedia.com or at eplex.xyz. Bookmark it and enjoy it all day. Echoplex is very supportive of our local music scene, and we hope you enjoy the soundtrack they've so graciously sent in for us to play on our network. If you like who you hear, please go check them out. The names of the artists are displayed on the player at echoplexmedia.com and at eplex.xyz.